Morning, everybody. Robert Phoenix here, and it is Monday. What's happening? Monday, the 29th of October. And I don't know if you heard the news, but there were mass arrests last night, and literally hundreds of people were just disappeared. Some of them tied to the Democratic Party, some of them tied to big business, corporations, and I'm being completely fallacious. None of it happened. None of it happened. It hasn't happened. We're still waiting. Good morning, Joe. We're still waiting. We're still waiting for the big hammer to hit. We're still waiting for people to be snatched up out of their lives and flown off into the night on planes headed for Guantanamo Bay. It hasn't happened. And the whole month of October, which is the month that QAnon had publicized and prophesied, that it would be the month where things would go down. Good morning, Beth. Hasn't occurred. Hasn't occurred. So again, I'm not casting aspersion onto the people that have followed QAnon, that have bought into QAnon, that have seen QAnon as being a kind of a virtual savior. Good morning, Night Dust Gypsy. Hi, Ani. What we have here, would she say? I was just listening to your Sunday live stream. You were live. Good morning. Hey, what's going on? Yeah. You know, I normally do it on the other channel, and sometimes switching the channels gets a little confusing. So we wound up on this channel last night. It's okay. It's fine. I mean, eventually, the core people, they'll follow me, go back and forth. It's all good. So we're sitting in a time now where it's like, okay, the QAnon. I think the QAnon myth, because it happened right around the 25th, 29th. Of October last year. That's when QAnon came onto the scene. I think QAnon is gone. I think the vapor trails are gone. And if anything, QAnon was a catalyst, an activator, and a stimulator. What's going on, Alexis? Morning, Nicotino. How's the picture today? Last night it was really weird, apparently. Is the picture good today? Last night, there was some weird psychedelic show going on with the live stream. So I just wanted to make sure that we were okay with that. Picture is weird again. Okay, well, that means there's probably something wrong with my computer. Pixelating, all right. It's very strange because when I see myself, I'm not pixelating. Yeah. Hi, Rita. Going in and out. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to have to, I don't know. Because I'm not pixelating. When I watch video, it doesn't pixelate for me. So I don't know, maybe it's a camera thing. Tomorrow I have a camera that I can attach to my computer. I also have another computer that I can do the show on. So we'll give it a different kind of look tomorrow, just in case. I got options, man. I got options, and options are important, and you should have options too. Theoretically, they're good to have. And especially in times like these, you need to have options. And those options are anything from having, at least 30 days worth of food on hand, 30 days worth of food and water. If you had 30 days worth of water on hand in Austin, you wouldn't be running off to HEB last week to go grab water because Austin could not filter its water properly. I want to talk about Austin's water supply and water's crisis. So is it Cuba gone? Likely. It goes off and on. Just another acid trip. At least you can hear me. Well, look who's here. Like clockwork. Here he is, the man. So hi, Jasper. Jasper just wants to get in, have his little Jasper moment. Yeah. The indoors is Jasper's domain. The outdoors, Rosie's domain. So, it's beautiful. There's balance in the universe, right? Jasper doesn't go outside and try to get on Rosie's trip on the deck. And, and then Rosie doesn't come in and try to strong paw Jasper's little perch over here on the table. It's beautiful. We can learn a lot from animals in nature, don't we think? Yeah. Okay. So I want to get into Austin's water crisis a little bit today because I think it's a really interesting phenomenon and I believe, a link to Agenda 21, which, look, there are going to be things that, like talking about Agenda 21 3 or 4 years ago, might have been really fringy and out there, but more and more people are talking about it. And I guarantee you, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, at some point in the not so distant future, maybe 2 to 3 years from now, maybe sooner, is going to be considered a version of hate speech, right? It's going to be considered an extreme point of view, an extreme attitude, an extreme belief, and there's going to be censorship around talking about Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. I mean, you can just see the writing on the wall. The people who are essentially, I don't want to say they're controlling the internet, but there are people that have a large amount of power and sway. We know who those people are. It's Google, it's the ISPs. To some extent, it's Facebook. I think really the big mover and shaker are Google's and the ISPs. Like for instance, Gab, and I actually have a Gab account. I think I posted one time on Gab, and I'm not here to say, oh well, I've only posted one time on Gab. I don't give a shit. Yeah, I don't care if I post 20 times. I'm not into. I can't get into Twitter culture. I can't get into 144 character culture or whatever it is now. It's not my thing. So, but the ISP that controls Gab has said, you're out of here. You're done. You're being the ISP, Gab, not the Gab being the company that has the kind of alternative free speech version of /Facebook/ Twitter. They don't want it. Now they're taking it down. And clearly, if they're somehow able to continue to have their platform, they're not going to get paid because PayPal has disconnected their account from Gab. You see how everything is now so connected into the web? It is so connected into the web that if we don't have any kind of like quote unquote real world sort of connections or real world options, there's that word again, options, that we're locked in, and the internet becomes ultimately a cage. And that's what we're seeing now. It's a cage, it's a virtual cage, or it's a virtual zoo. And you behave well in the virtual zoo, you'll get your 3 squares a day, and you'll be able to kind of do business as long as it's within certain parameters. You get outside the lines on the internet and you're big enough and loud enough, guess what? Your 3 squares cease to exist. They open up the cage. Say, go out and fend for yourself in the world. And the way that everything's been constructed is that all the resources, well, not all the resources, but a lot of resources have been invested into digital virtual, and brick and mortar, and that world is really going away. So it's almost created a hierarchy of license, right? A hierarchy of license and a hierarchy of needs. Where are you going to put one? You're going to put the virtual, digital over the physical because the physical doesn't have the resources. Although I firmly believe that the physical world is really something that we cannot forget, we cannot negate. In fact, we probably need to put more resources into our relationship with the physical world. So if you have a business that's online, you may want to think about making sure that you have kind of an offline backdoor, that you can do transactions offline. So for me, what I need to do is I need to build more of a presence here in Fredericksburg and Hill Country so I can have physical clients versus having to always depend on the internet. I don't mind depending on the internet as long as the internet and I are cool. I got no problem with that. But we just have to have options. These are really, really important things to think about. Okay, trust, tether your camel and then trust in God. Computer Forever just uploaded a good video on Gab takedown. To me, the Gab takedown almost seems premeditated. Now, there are forces at work, and I've been reading about this. There are forces at work now that want to essentially take the fringe down. Like there's scrubbing. There's going to be a lot of scrubbing going on the internet. Articles are going to go away. Old posts are going to go away. Websites will go away. We're going to see this virtual whitewashing take place on the internet. It's already happening. And that's for content that's already been created. Content that is going to be created or about to be created, well, they want to tamp that down. And they want to make sure that people's voices are muted for fear of what? For fear of being labeled a certain type of person, or fear of that they're being able to transact will go away. And fear is really one of the greatest sort of jail keepers, cell keepers. So, it's like fear is the guard. Fear is the cell block guard at the door of the mind. This is truly what happens with it. And so we're all, to some extent, entrained around fear, and we have to face our fears, and they are not easy. Facing our fears can be very challenging. Getting through the fear of being alone, getting through the fear of not having a home, getting through the fear of not having enough money, getting through the fear of illness, getting through all these various fears. And if we can get through these fears, and ultimately nothing can touch us. But to do that, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of nerve. We have to figure out where we're really hunkered down, and where we're corded, and where we're afraid and holding on to something. But once we can move past those milestones in our life, and they are milestones, they're big. They're the demons. They're the demons that chain us to a certain type of existence, most of which is really very, very limiting for us. We can do that, then we can begin to soar a bit more. And it's doable. It is really doable. It is not undoable. But in order to do it, you've got to have some help, right? You got to have a little support from your community. You've got to have a stronger internal connection with God. I'll use the word God. That's really important. You're going to have to find that core, that piece inside of you that can stare down these things, but also unhooking from the programs. Man, that's such an important deal to be able to hook from the programs, because once you unhook from the programs, the energy comes. The energy comes to you. And now you have more energy to deal with your world. We have more energy for change. And the only way we can experience change is if we have energy. That's the bottom line. When you have transformation, you need energy to have transformation. Correct? GeoCities webpage. There were a lot of really cool communities, like back in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was some good stuff going on. And a lot of these companies just didn't have a good economic model, or they were bought up by other entities. I mean, to this day, I don't even think Amazon makes a profit. I could be wrong. I don't think Amazon turns a profit. I know YouTube doesn't have a profit. I think Amazon might, but YouTube does not turn a profit. Think about that. Just think about that for a moment. Are my old shows backed up? No, I got to do that. I actually have to do that. That's a lot of work, man. What I'm thinking of doing is like hiring somebody in India. I'm serious, to just like download everything, put it onto a hard drive, and send it to me. And I think that'd probably be a good thing to do, because I got a lot of really good interviews. I used to do a lot of interviews back, and there weren't video interviews, but I have a lot of interviews with people like Jay Widener and Bruce Lipton and Don Miguel Ruiz. A lot of stuff. I was on it. I wonder if your YT is a good company to work for. If YT YouTube is a good company to work for, I don't know. They're owned by Google. Take your own shot at that. Zines, yeah, they're opening a bookstore here in town, a small bookstore, but it's going to be more than just a bookstore. It's going to be kind of a community place. It's going to be a place where you can rent out small office space. It's going to be very interesting, and I think in a small town, these kinds of environments would be welcome. Okay. Have we mentioned shooting in North Carolina this morning? Oh boy, do we have? No. Let's check the news. I was going to get into Robert Bowers, but let's check the news about Carolina. Give me 1 second here. Hold on. Where are we now? Oh yeah, it's hot and heavy. Hot. See, we have student shot at North Carolina school, another student in custody. Okay, so looks like this might be an actual shooting. And maybe this is the trolling for fish with nets in the open sea, right? Every now and then, when you cast a net, you'll get something. All right, let's find out what's happening here. I'll just read this. This is from abcnews.go.com. Student shot in North Carolina, school student custody, police, blah, blah, blah. Okay, a student was shot and injured at a North Carolina high school Monday morning. Let's see. The wounded student was taken to a hospital in unknown condition after the shooting unfolded at Butler High School, Matthews, North Carolina, 12 miles outside of Charlotte. Authorities said the shooting was believed to be an isolated incident and that the scene was secured by police. Police have the weapon. And let's see, what else do we have here? Classes resumed after a brief lockdown. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? Classes resumed after a brief lockdown. Okay, let's go back to class. Shooting over. That probably is not a stage shooting. It's probably not a stage shooting. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. Okay. It'll be interesting to see what happens, how it's framed, and who the actual quote unquote victim and perp is, and if they release the names. That'll be interesting because if they're minors, theoretically, they can't release their names. Although in the case of our boy down in Parkland, Florida, who I believe was a minor still, well, he might have been 18. Maybe that's how they got around that. Anyway, we'll see what happens there. But apparently there was a shooting, and apparently we'll have a David Hogg sighting in North Carolina in the not so distant future. According to Trump, automatic execution for shooters now. 3 shootings are, we had 3. I don't think this one was planned though. I think this one was probably, again, the analogy is fish in a net versus fish caught on a line. Very different, very, very different. So here's the deal. Here is the dealio. Who is Robert Bowers? Who is the man that is responsible for shooting and killing 11 people? There's that number 11 in a synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Who is Robert Bowers? Well, the New York Times tried to find out, and guess what? They couldn't find hardly anything on the man. So I'm going to read this story to you, and then I'm going to share with you my findings on Robert Bowers, which gives us actually more questions, serious questions than answers. So here we go. This is from New York Times. This was posted yesterday. And it says, Pittsburgh synagogue massacre suspect was pretty much a ghost. And the apartments that he lives in almost look like they're long-term apartments, because you can see that there is looks like an office with a neon open sign on the window. These are very, very small apartments. They look like they're small and very temporary. Okay, so keep that in mind. And this is interesting too, because there were 11 people that died, and his apartment is one of 11 in McNulty Acres. So there's that number 11 again. Very, very interesting. We all know that 11 is the number of duality, and we can see the Twin Towers inside of the number 11, correct? So here we go. Robert Bowers, the man accused of gunning down 11 congregants. He's also one of 11 apartments in McNulty Acres. In a virulently anti-Semitic rampage at a Pittsburgh synagogue was an isolated, awkward man who lived alone and struggled with basic human interactions. Neighbors and others who knew him said on Sunday, he was in his own little world, said Jim Brinsky, 46, a friend from childhood. So this would be interesting. Now, I did a web search for Robert Bowers, okay, and it came up for me that the Robert Bowers that I found was also 46 years old, also known as Rob D. Bowers. I'll get into that a little bit more, but let me continue to read this. Mr. Brinsky said he and Mr. Bowers, 46, grew up together, but that he never met Mr. Bowers' parents. He got the impression that Mr. Bowers had a difficult home life. As teenagers, he said they built pipe bombs, blew up watermelons and trees as pranks. Give me 1 second, here's something bugging me. Okay. They drifted apart by the time they got to Baldwin High School, where Mr. Brinsky said Mr. Bowers wore a camouflage jacket and drifted alone through the halls. Mr. Bowers is not listed in any activities or sports in his 1989 junior class yearbook, and he does not appear in the next year's book as a senior at all. It is unclear whether he graduated. He was pretty much a ghost, Mr. Brinsky said. His next-door neighbors also described him as a man who was barely there. In the shabby one-bedroom ground floor apartment where he had lived for about a year and a half, how did they know it was shabby? Did they go inside? Was the New York Times inside his apartment? I mean, maybe it was a quaint little one-bedroom apartment filled with all kinds of, lace doilies and succulent plants. Who knows? I don't know. But apparently they did. Because, of course, he'd live in a shabby apartment. Mr. Bowers made such an insubstantial impression on his next-door neighbor, Carrie Owens, that she forgot his name. And soon after he introduced himself, Mr. Bowers said he worked as a truck driver and needed the apartment primarily to store his stuff, Ms. Owens said. Interesting. Owens. I felt bad because he'd say, "Hi, Carrie," and I wouldn't remember his name, Ms. Owens said. When I saw his picture on the news, my stomach dropped. I couldn't believe it. Quiet as he appeared to be in person, he loudly spewed murderous hatred and bigotry online. For months online, before the shooting, Mr. Bowers unleashed a torrent of anti-immigrant, anti-Jewish invective and conspiracy theories on Gab, a social media network that has been embraced by white nationalists. He had 21 guns registered in his name and carried out the massacre with an AR-style assault rifle. Okay, AR-15 style. It wasn't an AR-15, it was AR-15 style. And, of course, 3 handguns. Ms. Owens said she was stunned by all of this, echoing the shock of other neighbors who told the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette that Mr. Bowers had been a quiet neighbor and had lived with his maternal grandfather until his grandfather died in 2014. The apartment building where Mr. Bowers had most recently lived is in Baldwin Borough, a hilly, middle-class Pittsburgh neighborhood that is a 30-minute drive south of the Tree of Life congregation in Squirrel Hill. His apartment is one of 11 in the grandly named McNulty Acres, a 2-story building that includes the offices of a plumbing company. Maybe that's what I was seeing there. That was maybe the plumbing company was there. A rusty barbecue smoker and an empty beer bottle sat outside on Sunday. I guess that qualifies as shabby. Law enforcement officials had cordoned off the street on Saturday, and robots entered Mr. Bowers' apartment, said a neighbor, Jerry, who declined to provide his full name. On Sunday, there were no signs of police or FBI activity. Interesting. Robots entered. We're living in such a changing world, aren't we? Mr. Bowers seemed to leave for work for a few days at a time, but when he was home, neither Mr. Bowers or his teal blue sedan moved. Ms. Owens said her fiance, Chris Hall, 28, says he sometimes came home late from work to see Mr. Bowers sitting in his car smoking and apparently listening to the radio. There was nothing about him, not even a bumper sticker on his car, Mr. Hall said. Ms. Owens would sometimes hear him through her wall chatting with the landlord when he went to drop off his rent in cash at the landlord's office around the corner. Okay, so this is very interesting because when we're dealing with this event, we're also dealing with the event that took place with the pipe bombs in Cesar Sayoc, who is the exact opposite. He had a van that was plastered with stickers. It was Trump this, Trump that, Trump this, Trump that. And Cesar Sayoc was a Democrat for a very long time who theoretically just changed to being a Republican. And now Cesar Sayoc is saying, I didn't do it. I didn't do that. His attorney now is starting to make some noise. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Mr. Cesar Sayoc, who, by the way, has some very unsavory connections with a guy, what's his name? Ricky. Oh, God. I'll have to go to Facebook. But he has some unsavory connections with a lifelong member of the CIA, good friend, and a guy that's been connected to death squads. So Sayoc is an unusual character. I believe Sayoc is an asset, but I'm just telling you the difference between the two, right? We got a guy that's got all the stickers. We know his affiliations. theoretically. And he's an easy mark. And then there's a guy with nothing. Nothing. He's got no footprint, no bumper stickers, no trace of anything except the one thing that he had in this world where there's any footprint is a Gab account. That's it. That's it. It almost feels like Robert Bowers was created just for this event. I'm not saying that he was created by external forces. Maybe they're socialized forces. I don't know, but it almost feels like he was created just for this event. No background, no connections, no life, no senior yearbook picture. I mean, he almost feels like Adam Lanza in a lot of ways. He's like an adult version of Adam Lanza. There's no social networks except for Gab that he's associated with. I mean, if it's not for him and Gab and him paying the rent, this guy doesn't exist. Ms. Owens would sometimes hear him through her wall, chatting with the landlord when he went to drop off his rent in cash, a bank account, maybe. But he had no guests. He lived alone. He watched television late into the night sometimes. He used a post office box instead of the mailboxes at the apartment complex. But nothing about his behavior concerned her, and their conversations never went beyond pleasantries. Do you know who he is? He's the Mel Gibson character from Conspiracy Theory. That's who he is. She said she last saw his car when she went to work on Friday morning, but does not know whether he was still there when she returned that night. Like much about him, the memory is opaque. It's very unsettling knowing all that stuff that was used to hurt those people was on the other side of the wall, she said. I didn't see any signs. I can't even comprehend that he had that much hate. It seems so normal. Okay, so one of the things that this sets up is that it sets up a huge field of paranoia. Because this guy was basically somebody who was a nobody. He had no affiliations. He had no outward sort of shows of aggression, unlike Caesar Sayoc, who threatened the Florida Power Company with his pipe bombs. I mean, Sayoc's got, he's a male stripper. He works out at the gym. He probably, there might be some steroids involved. I don't know. But usually when you get into gym culture, that's a steroid culture. Very, very different. Lots of stuff on Instagram, lots of stuff on Facebook. Caesar Sayoc, who has actually two names, two identities. There's a clear trail as to who this guy is, where he came from. There's a junior high picture of him that's available. I mean, all this stuff is there for him. And with Bowers, there's nothing. So we're seeing here two different images, right? Two different images, duality. One image is somebody who's displaying and advertising, hey, look at me, I'm trouble. Hey, look at me, I'm a potential suspect. Hey, look at me, profile me. Then there's the guy who's like playing poker with life and not showing his cards at all. And there's no signs, no tells. So what does that leave? People are walking around thinking, shit, the most normal person I know could be a potential terrorist. They could be a potential synagogue shooter. On the other hand, people that are opinionated and have a passion, theoretically, which this guy did not, by the way. Caesar Sayoc didn't have a passion for Trump. He was not a MAGA guy. Now you can say, oh, well, I got to watch out for them. So any display. So how do you navigate? Like if you're somebody who's trying to navigate life and sees this, right? Because you're going to see people, oh my God, what about that neighbor who lives across the hall? He never says anything. I got a guy who lives down the hall from me. I've seen him one time. That's it. I don't know who he is. Who knows? He could be another Robert Bowers, right? And to be honest with you, you'll find like some middle-aged men who live in apartments because their families have gone south. They haven't remarried. They haven't gotten another relationship. And so, they're living in apartments. So there's plenty of middle-aged men in apartment living that seem very nondescript. Although, quite frankly, that wouldn't include me because I'm actually very social here. So I wanted to read something. And what I'm going to read to you has more to do with what's not in it than what's in it. Okay? So here we go. There's a service called Intellius. INTELIUS. And it's not a bad sort of background check service. I've used it before just to try to find like a date of birth for somebody like astrology, like Stephen Paddock. I found his date of birth by using Intellius. And I did the same thing for Robert Bowers because I'm an astrologer and I wanted to find out his date of birth. Okay. It's the only way I could find out. He was born September 4th, 1972. And here's what I found out about him. That he lived at 5133 Fieldcrest Drive. There was a phone number and an email address. And that's it. No family or work. No marriage or divorce records. No education history. No employment history. No social networks. Well, Gab is a social network. But probably not showing up here. And I didn't go into the criminal stuff or, it was like I just wanted to get his address, not his address, his date of birth. So I could look. He's a Virgo, by the way. September 4th, 1972. Theoretically. And I wanted to see if there were any connections. Anything that we could kind of get as a profile from Robert Bowers. There's nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There are a series of addresses, all in Pittsburgh. That's it. Although there was one address he had. Well, they're both in Pennsylvania, looks like. Both within the state of Pennsylvania. Whitehall. He lived in Whitehall. He had a P.O. box in Whitehall. P.O. box. Oh, the P.O. box is in Pittsburgh. That's his latest address, I think. That in the Fieldcrest. And he had an address in Whitehall. That's the other Pennsylvania address. Wherever. Centers from Whitehall. It's so fascinating because both Sayok and Bowers occupy these two different poles. On the Sayok side, Sayok is theoretically a big-time Trump supporter. Apparently his van is the symbol for that. Although that van had been parked in one spot for over a year and didn't move. Okay. So he's supposed to be a Trump supporter. Big time. And then you have Robert Bowers, who's not a Trump supporter, and says Trump is a Zionist, and Trump has sold out to the Zionists, and he's anti-Israel. So you see that we have both these models operating. One guy's supposed to be pro-Trump. The other guy is not pro-Trump, but he's also anti-Semitic. The whole thing is mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. I just love it when they decide to take care of the grounds here during my show. That gets into the whole duality trip, doesn't it? So Trump's going to Pittsburgh. He's going to Squirrel Hill. Check this out. A group of 11 rabbis. Can we get more 11 here? We've got 11 people that have died. We have Robert Bowers living in one of 11 apartment units. And now there are 11 rabbis. So now we're up to 33. The magic number 33. Isn't that interesting? 11 rabbis have published an open letter condemning the president, saying he wouldn't be welcome in Pittsburgh unless he denounces white nationalism and stops targeting minority groups, migrants, and refugees, effectively laying the blame for the shooting at Trump's feet. This guy didn't even like Trump. Theoretically, by blaming Trump for his latest incident, this is from Zero Hedge, by the way, the rabbis who signed the letter have apparently forgotten about the more than 600 incidences of civil, uncivil, and threatening behavior directed at conservatives, blah, blah, blah. More to the point, Trump's allies stepped up to defend him. And last night, as he took stage at a rally in Illinois where he condemned the shooting. Trump again blamed the media for inciting violence. The fake news is doing everything in their power to blame Republicans, conservatives, and me for the division and hatred that's been going on for so long in our country. Actually, it is their fake and dishonest reporting which is causing problems far greater than they understand. You got to hand it to Trump. The guy is not afraid to double down and find his enemy. He's triangulating here. This is what Trump is doing. He's triangulating. And I think it's actually a very effective strategy. The rabbis were members of Ben the Ark, a Jewish partnership for justice, let's say social justice. And in the letter, they accused Trump of attacking minority groups, from transgender people to immigrants, and demanded they let up on his attacks. Where has this happened? Where has Trump attacked transgender people? Where has Trump attacked minority groups? What we're seeing a vast kind of swath of the Black American community that are transferring their allegiance and loyalty to Trump because theoretically he's actually doing something, theoretically, versus the same old bullshit that the Democrats and the progressives have been doing for years. I've never once seen Trump come out. I mean, he's friends. He's friends with Caitlyn Jenner, for crying out loud. There are gender-neutral bathrooms in Trump Tower. Trump has he's like got somebody on his inside of his administration who I think is lesbian. I mean, you cannot pin that on Trump. And the immigrant piece, that's a problem. That is an issue. It's an issue. And it's an issue that's being politicized. These people are not, it's like, Mexico is willing to grant them asylum. Did they want it? No. They don't want asylum in Mexico. No, they want to get to the United States. And it has nothing to do with sure. Is this theoretically a better country than Belize or Guatemala? No doubt. No doubt. What if, let me just say, let's play a game for a minute. Let's say, for instance, George Soros, or the figurehead, the Mandarin, the symbol of George Soros, the bag boy for the real big money interest, was throwing all this money at the caravan. And there's some evidence out there that says that that's absolutely true. And all this money around disruption, through the Open Society, Tides Foundation. What if they took that money and actually invested it into Central America? What if they took that money and said, you know what, we're going to get into Central America. We're going to rebuild the infrastructure. We're going to help you set up small businesses. We're going to give out microloans. We're going to empower these people so that they're happy to stay there. Why doesn't that happen? Supposedly he's got more money than God. You would think that being able to invest in those countries might actually be a good thing. They may actually put a freaking statue up of him in those countries. But of course, we know he's just a figurehead. He's just a bad guy. That's all he is. Bad man, bad guy. He's an errand boy. But think about it. Think if all that money was invested, Central America, microloans, people would be happy to stay there. You have people that have work and purpose and all those things that allow a person to feel like they're contributing, not just to life or society, but their spirit and their soul, which is very important. Our Jewish community, this is from the rabbis, our Jewish community is not the only group you have targeted, the group wrote. When did he target the Jewish community? For crying out loud, his son-in-law is big-time Jewish, right? I mean, he's running on, he's got Bibi Netanyahu coming over to his father's house. He's sleeping on the couch because Bibi's sleeping in his bed. Jared's got the plan for the Middle East peace plan. He goes to Israel more often than I go to HEB. I mean, his daughter has a Jewish name. Ivanka's Jewish name is Yael. Each one of his sons has married Jewish women. He said, "Hey, we're going to take the embassy and we're going to move it to Jerusalem." Sheldon Adelson said, "Hey, you want to get elected? You want my money? Move the embassy." Of course, that's what he did. Now, theoretically, this is why this guy Robert Bowers, whoever he was, didn't like him. Nonetheless, he did what he was told, and he did it. And Trump has always swore an oath and a fealty to Israel. So he's got the local connections. All of his kids married into Jewish families. And his daughter, who theoretically can't be Jewish, even though she converted, married kind of a major player in the Jewish community. So I don't know where they get the targeting part. You have also deliberately undermined the safety of people of color. How? How has he done that? Muslims, LGBTQ people, and people with disabilities. That's a bunch of bullshit. And here's what they're trying to do. They're trying to create an image of the people that support Trump as being hateful and going after these people with clubs and sticks, and torches, and that Trump is giving them the political and moral license to do so. I don't think that's the case. Now, they're trying to say that this guy, Bowers, is the guy that is connected. He is sort of the mutated manifestation of Trump's ideology, and that can be further from the truth. He hated Donald Trump. But don't allow a good storyline to just go unused, right? I mean, you got a good storyline there. You may as well use it, okay? The letter was reminiscent of the backlash that Trump faced after he said there was blame on both sides after last summer's Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. Using familiar phrasing, the group accused the president of spreading lies and sowing fear. The Torah teaches that every human being is made B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. That means all of us, the leaders wrote. In our neighbors, Americans and people worldwide who have reached out to give our community strength, there we find the image of God. Well, that's an interesting statement. Can I just repeat that? In our neighbors, Americans and people worldwide who've reached out to give our community strength, there we find the image of God. Okay, that's fine. What if they didn't? Is the image of God not there? What if we're just sitting here in Fredericksburg, Texas, and we're just living our lives? Do we not then represent the image of God? Is it a selective image? Is it only an image as if we reach out and lend our support and our strength? If that's the case, and we're not doing that, does that mean that we're godless? I'll keep reading. They also pointed out that Squirrel Hill is the neighborhood where Fred Rogers, of Mr. Rogers fame, was born and raised, and that by visiting the neighborhood, Trump would be sullying Mr. Rogers' reputation with his divisive rhetoric. Here in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, we express gratitude for first responders, for the outpouring of support from our neighbors near and far. Trump has blasted the government as a wacko and demanded that the U.S. come together to extract the hateful poison of anti-Semitism from this world. It's a pretty strong statement. The shooting was the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history, leaving 11 dead and 6 wounded, 6 being the inverse of 9. Just saying. But of course, the letter makes no mention of those remarks. Of course not. Unsurprisingly, one detail that the most mainstream media outlets left out of their coverage of the letter is the fact that George Soros' son, Alexander Soros, is the chairman of Ben the Ark's board. Should I read that sentence again? It's just a coincidence, I'm sure. Unsurprisingly, one detail that most mainstream media outlets left out of their coverage of the letter is the fact that George Soros' son, Alexander Soros, is the chairman of Ben the Ark's board, and even helped the organization launch a Jewish political action committee a few years after Ben the Ark was created, according to this 2015 Politico story. Do you know Mr. Rogers was a sniper? Let me just confirm that. Mr. Rogers, Sniper. Let's find this out. I think he was. I think he was a marksman. Let me just find this out. Here we go. Okay, here. This is from Wikipedia. I'm not going to go into Snopes. I'm going to read Wikipedia. So there's a rumor that he was a. I need to confirm this. Confirm or deny. Confirm or deny. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here it goes. Rogers was red-green colorblind. He swam every morning and neither smoked nor drank. He became a vegetarian. I don't want to eat anything that has a mother. Contrary to rumor, he never served in the military. Okay, I needed to see if that was true. See, I looked things up. There was a rumor that he was a sniper. But you never know. You never know. No, apparently, according to Wikipedia, he's not. I'm not sure why it came out that he was. It's an interesting, very interesting rumor. Isn't that right? Anyway, let me get back to this piece here because it's important. President Trump, you are not welcome in Pittsburgh until you fully denounce white nationalism. What if he says, because he just came out and he said, I'm a nationalist. Do you have to be white to be a nationalist? I don't know. Do we have to be white? I mean, if you ask Candace Owen, she's black, I bet you she'll tell you she's a nationalist. Don King's a nationalist. They would say they're nationalists. I'm sure if I drill down into the Latin American community, took 5 seconds, 10 seconds, ran my head around, I'd probably find somebody who called themselves a nationalist too. I don't think you have to be white to be nationalist. They're trying to turn the United States into South Africa. They're trying to make the United States out to be an apartheid state. This is exactly what's going on. This is what the language is about. I'm not stating a conspiracy theory. I can just tell you. You can just see it. They're equating the United States and Donald Trump with being a white nationalist, which is what theoretically South Africa and Rhodesia were during the 50s, 60s, 70s, and up through the 80s, until finally everything just got blown up. The murderer's last public statement invoked the compassionate work of the Jewish Refugee Service, HIAS. So they're bringing people into this country. At the end of a week in which you spread lies and sowed fear about migrant families in Central America, he killed Jews in order to undermine the efforts of all those who find shared humanity with immigrants and refugees. President Trump, you're not welcome in Pittsburgh until you cease your assault on immigrants and refugees. The Torah teaches us that every human being is made of B'Tselem Elohim, the image of God. This means all of us. Well, if that's true, then apparently even the guy that theoretically did the shooting, because he's in custody now. Will we ever hear from him? Doubtful. But even him would be made of B'Tselem Elohim. Every human being. Is he a human being or is he not a human being? Maybe he's not a human being. In our neighbors, Americans and people worldwide have reached out to give our community strength. There we find the image of God. We cannot speak for all Pittsburghers, or even all Jewish Pittsburghers. We know we speak for a diverse and unified group. We say, President Trump, you are not welcome in Pittsburgh until you commit yourself to compassionate, democratic policies that recognize the dignity of us all. Ben the Ark, Pittsburgh, Jamie Forbes, Joshua Friedman, Jamie Harris, Tammy Hips, Harry Hawkheiser, Sasha King, Jonathan Mayo, Eleanor Nathanson, Abigail Oren, Kate Rothstein, and there's that name, Yael Silk. Is that ironic? There's a Yael on the board, and Trump has his own Yael, his daughter. This is yet another firestorm. We're going to firestorm after firestorm after firestorm. It's going to keep building and building and building until the elections, which are now just, 8 days away. A lot can happen in 8 days. A lot. Trust me on this. All right, let me check into the old chat room here. Let's see how you people are doing. Gladio, they have people in place. March 20 is a good birthday. I expect him to be a pacifist. Rogers is March 20th, right? He was in the military. Yeah, I looked that up. Let's see. I'd expect him to be a pacifist. What a shit show. Yeah, but the Goyim aren't considered human. Well, Joe, how could you bring up such a Joe? That's a very hateful point. It's true, though. I mean, there are tracts that are out there. I could read you pieces from rabbinical Judaic history that actually refers to what Joe is saying. Well, you could say, well, not all Jewish people are like that, and that's true, by the way. That's true. Just like not all quote unquote white people are like Robert Bowers, and that is true too. Right? But what Joe's saying is actually true as it relates to some people, not all. Right? What's going on, Tim? What is going on? Look, divide and conquer always. Look, here we go. Here we go. We're right now we are in the birth canal. Okay. We're in a birth canal phase, and a lot can happen. There's a lot of shit that can happen. Lynn sent me a link about war, that potentially war is on the horizon. I've been reading a lot. War, rumors of war. You've got some positioning going on in the South China Sea. We've got stuff happening in Russia as it relates to Ukraine. I mean, certainly there are enough hot spots where war could break out. But remember, we could get to an 11th hour moment, and it feels like the place is going to just go to hell in a handbasket. And in that 11th hour, everything gets turned around. And we have the so-called world savior come into play and puts the brakes on the 11th hour world crisis. That is a very possible scenario. And that world savior, that person that steps in to put the brakes on the crisis, that is the person to keep your eye on. Okay? So, look, stay cool. Don't give in to fear. Just don't. The fear piece is something we all have to work with. And we all have these totems of fear in our lives that we just have to remove and stare down. And we're living in a time where there is a huge amount of kind of collective energy creating this demonic egregore that's built on fear and suspicion and all the energies that are basically festering and fulminating. And they're out there. They're like clouds. They're like etheric clouds. And if you're not right inside yourself, you can breathe them in, and next thing you know, you're gonna be off on some kind of heavy duty anxiety trip or fear trip. We have to face our fears collectively, face our fears personally. It's the way it is. There's no two ways about it. And we all have it. We've all got it inside of ourselves. But it's okay. We have the ability to turn those pages as well. Hey, just wanted to also let you know that Jair Bolsonaro, also known as the tropical Trump, he's now the new president of Brazil. 55.54% Bolsonaro, 44.46% Haddad. So he was in a runoff against the candidate from the Socialist Workers Party. That's Fernando Haddad. And Bolsonaro has won. So that'll be very interesting to see. He is a far-right congressman. He's known as the tropical Trump. This is the statement from him during a live TV address. The people saw the truth despite the media. A big part of the media put me on a shaming position. Thank you all for your prayer, confidence. Let's together change Brazil's destiny. We knew to where Brazil was headed, and now we know where we want to go. But we'll see. I mean, countries like Brazil and even the United States, they're in the pockets of the IMF and the World Bank. They're not going anywhere that the IMF and the World Bank don't want them to go. The only way that they can do that is basically say and claim that the loans that have been rendered against their countries are invalid. And I think that really should be the case. I really do. In fact, I don't think it should be limited to just Brazil or the United States. I think the global debt should be made zero. Zero it all out. Zero the whole fucking thing out. So a small country like, French Guiana or another small Lesotho, that these countries have an opportunity to have a fresh start. I mean, really, this is where I think the world needs to go. Zero out the fucking debt for everybody. Just zero. But that'll never happen because the people that hold the debt control the narrative and they control the direction and the resources. Most of these countries in South Africa and South America have sold their resources over for perpetuity as collateral against past debt. That's what's happened. I'll continue to read this. We have everything to be a big nation. We have governability. My government will be committed to its people. Truth will free this country. I am a defender of freedom and will run a government that is democratic and respects the Constitution. All pledges will be fulfilled. The mission of rescuing Brazil will be accomplished. So this guy is trying to turn Brazil into America. Meanwhile, there are certain forces in this country that are trying to turn America into Brazil. Is that ironic? Anyway. This was a polarized election, but what we are hearing from our reporters on the ground is that the mood right now is celebratory. Fireworks in Sao Paulo, Brasilia, and Rio. Lots of cheering for Bolsonaro with his Mito myth nickname against the Workers' Party. In Brasilia, people are screaming, Lula, na cadeia, Lula in jail, from their windows to celebrate Bolsonaro's win. Lula was the former president. I guess she's the Hillary Clinton figure in this drama. Not only did Bolsonaro win the election, but a strong showing from candidates that supported him was seen in the state governor races in Sao Paulo, Minas Gerais, Rio de Janeiro, Santa Catarina, Rio Grande do Sul. Candidates that strongly vowed for Bolsonaro won the election. So now he's got support. Global News TV reporting that police are trying to prevent clashes between pro and anti-Bolsonaro supporters in Sao Paulo. The broadcaster said there were some rocks and bottles thrown after the official results were announced, but things seem to have calmed down. Bernd Berg, who's a strategist at Woodman Asset Management, is bullish. Bolsonaro landed a landslide victory, promising Brazil a better future after years of economic downturn, corrupt scandals that stroked the country. I'm confident Bolsonaro is going to deliver much-needed reforms to bring fiscal deficit, and the Bolsonaro rally will lift the Ibovespa to 130,000. I guess that's their version of the Dow, While the BRL will fall below $3, will fall $3 per dollar by the middle of next year. Let's see. 11 Financials research. Rafael Figueiredo said, good part of Bolsonaro's win was priced in, but markets open. Could be your forward tomorrow. Now investors should focus on Bolsonaro's speech, and specifically on his choices for the economic team and plans for the reform. So he's interesting. Very interesting. This guy is interesting. So Lance Welton, who writes for VDare, said Bolsonaro may well move the country in a strongly conservative direction, but amid all the MSM panic about Brazil's impending return to the dictatorship, it emerged from 33 years ago. 11 times 3. Let's see. A few seem to be asking a key question. How in heaven, so to speak, have Pentecostals managed to take over a country which was less than 50 years ago 95% Catholic? So Bolsonaro is a Pentecostal. There's a picture of him being baptized in a river. You don't have to do that with Catholicism. All right, let me check back into the old chat room here, see how you guys are doing. Well, love Trump's fear, right? Matrix glitch, ha, ha, ha. Yes, Robert, we do need a global, we got to reset, man. We got to have the reset. And I know a lot of people have done a lot of work paying off their student loans. And there are a lot of people who have been remiss on paying their student loans. And it's really not fair to the people who have paid off their student loans to the ones who haven't. But I think the student loan crisis should be zeroed out. Or if you have a student loan, you can work off your student loan with like, community service or something like that. But if they did decide to zero out the loans, the people that have paid off their loans, they could get like maybe a 15% kind of rebate on their loan. So at least they're getting something back, right? I mean, that's what there's plenty of money for that. Student loans are extortion. Absolutely. 100%. 100%. Yeah. So, hey, let's deal with the fear. Don't trip out. Don't take the bait. Try to use your skills to sort through things. Do your best not to be confrontational. Stay cool. Be cool. Work on yourself. Figure out ways in which you can make your life better. Expand your heart energy, your sphere of influence, while at the same time being able to kind of see directly into what's taking place. And don't shirk. This is not a time to shirk or to back down. It's also not a time to fall into traps or become a cliche. Remember that, okay? Just remember that. I'll be back tomorrow with another 15 minutes of flame, and maybe we'll do a follow-up on this North Carolina thing, which I think is really not a planned event. It's just not. All right. You know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, and you've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame. Have a great day. Take care.